In the name of God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, amen. Please be seated. Have you ever seen this thing before? What is this? Does anybody know what this is? Confusion? What is this? You know, you were here. It's a piece of plastic that was designed by a company called C.M. Almy, and it is the piece of plastic that makes the little tab in a priest's collar. This is what it looks like. This is Almy's version of it. There's other versions of it, but the same idea. Historically, they were linen, but now it's just a piece of plastic. This is a big part of my life. It's a big part of my life. I usually keep it in one of my breast pockets, but this one actually came from my car. I keep one spare in my car. Michael has a couple in her purse. There are several in my office. They're all over the place in my life because intentionally, like they're planted there because sometimes you forget to grab it and then you need it. This is my collar. I've been thinking about this collar this week because a collar like this one was a part of a show a TV show that I watched this week, and it made me think about my ministry, but then also the gospel this week, and I want to share it with you. So I've been watching The Walking Dead. You familiar with this show? I can tell from your laughter you are. 11 seasons long, several spinoffs. I haven't watched any of the spinoffs yet, but I will. 11 seasons. The last season took place 2 years ago, and I'm just now catching the final season. I watched it since seminary, really, like intermittently, whenever it would come out on streaming, I'd watch a season. I am the only person in my house who watches it. Obviously, my kids should not watch it. Walking Dead, it's a story of a post-apocalyptic zombie apocalypse, right? And there's just lots of killing of zombies and people turning into zombies, and it's scary, you know. Netflix says horror on it, but I enjoy watching it because it's a story. It's a zombie show, right? But it's really a human show. It's about kind of how humans and human communities kind of deal with this apocalyptic kind of moment. And the reason I'm telling you about Walking Dead is that I was watching, I'm midway through the final season, no spoilers, but there's a character who I believe started in the first season who is an Episcopal priest. His name's Gabriel. And really the whole arc of his 11 seasons is him grappling with what his own sense of forgiveness and shame over a really selfish and terrible decision he made when the world fell apart in the show. And he goes in between wearing his collar all the time and sometimes not wearing it. And lately, in the final parts of the series, he's been wearing his collar a lot more. He's been having the white, we call it the Roman tab, but he, like me, is an Episcopalian, and there was an episode that I just watched this week where he has been asked by his community to go with a team to meet some new survivors, some people who that this community have not encountered before. And they want him to go along, especially because of his collar, because he's a priest. And this community, they've observed their building, and they have crosses on the outsides of their building, and so they think that he'll be helpful to them in meeting this new community and bringing them into their community. And as they approach the building, they're kind of strategizing about what they're going to do when they go up there, who's going to talk, who's going to say. Gabriel takes his collar out. It just slides into the collar, right? And so he takes it out and puts it in his pocket, and the leader of their group says, "What are you doing? That's why you're coming. We need, what are you doing?" And he said, and he says, "I want them." Or no, I'm sorry. So he says, "This is my choice. This is what I'm doing." Right? So I'm interested. I start to pay attention a little bit more to the show, because I'm like, what? This is the first time that they're really commenting on it. It's this thing that's just happening throughout the show. Sometimes it's on, sometimes it's off. But this is the first time I remember seeing him take it off intentionally. I start paying attention because the question of when we wear our collar is one that comes up, especially for newer priests, like a lot. In our conversations with new priests when they're ordained, that question of, when should I wear it? When should I take it off? Should I wear it while I'm at grocery shopping? Or should I take it off? Do I only wear it when I'm in church context? Or do I wear some, a version of this is do you wear your collar on the plane conversation? When you're stuck with someone or two someone's near you for a time, do you advertise? Bishop Wolf used to say, it says, when you wear your collar, you're saying I'm open for business. People are going to talk to you, right? People are going to talk to you. You should just know that generally I don't. I take my collar off and have it in my pocket usually. And I don't have a philosophy about that. It's just habit. It's what I do. But it's a conversation that I've had multiple times, especially with newer priests. And so here it is. Gabriel on Walking Dead is taking off his collar. What's that about, right? So they go into this community. They're taken up to the leader of this community. And it turns out that he was looking out the window of this tower that they live in and saw Gabriel take his collar off. And so he says, Father, I saw you take your collar off. Why did you take that off? And he says, I wanted you to know who I was before you knew what I was. I wanted you to know who I was before you learned what I was. And I was sitting there. It was probably 1:30 in the morning. This is the only time that I'm able to watch these kinds of shows, Everybody's asleep in the house. And I remember pausing it and going, I really like that couplet, that turn of phrase, who I am before you knew what I am. It's interesting to me and reminding me of our gospel lesson today. In some ways, Jesus and his disciples today are having that conversation, a who versus a what. We're told this is the exact midpoint of the Gospel of Mark. Right? If you had just the Gospel of Mark and you let it fall open and it happened to fall perfectly in the middle, you would have our reading today. It's this moment when Jesus is on a journey. They're in Gentile territory, we're told, Caesarea Philippi. And he turns to his disciples and he says, who do people say that I am? Who do people say that I am? And his disciples say, well, some say you're Elijah, some say you're John the Baptist, some say you're one of the many prophets that we've had, kind of a reincarnation or re-inspiriting of these historical prophets, And then he says, seeing that they're deflecting, he says, but who do you say that I am? And Peter says, you are the Messiah. You are the Messiah, capital M, you saw it on the screen, right? You are the Messiah. And so Jesus says, yes. And he goes on to describe what is going to happen to him as Messiah. What's going to happen to him? He's going to go and he's going to teach and he's going to be rejected by the elders and the chief priests. And he's going to be brought up on charges and he's going to be killed. And then in 3 days, he's going to rise again. And you can kind of see Peter in the background going, what? And then he rebukes Jesus. He rebukes him. He says, no. And Jesus says, get behind me, Satan, to his disciple. You are putting your mind not on heavenly things, but on earthly things. Jesus is describing who he is, what it means to be the Messiah, what it means for him to be the Messiah. But Peter's response, and we know it's not in this text, but we're told that Peter is a zealot, which is a political ideology. And the zealots had a belief in what the Messiah was. The Messiah was going to be a rebellion leader, was going to lead a kind of a military force to kick out the Romans, to reclaim the homeland. Right? He was going to lead this rebellion. And what Jesus is describing is very different from that. Death and resurrection. Peter doesn't understand it. Jesus is asking a who question, who am I? And Jesus is saying that he, as Messiah, his who-ness, is going to be rooted in the cross and in his resurrection. But Peter has a problem with it because his conception of what the Messiah is a what. The Messiah is a military leader who's going to save us. Who versus what? Gabriel in the show says, I want people to know who I am before they know what I am. And Jesus says, who do you say that I am? This is one of the central questions of our lives in some ways. Who am I? It's a philosophical question. It's a question that we explore in therapy and self-reflection and journaling. We're always asking that question, who am I? And coming to our self-conception. And when we relate to one another, we're trying to learn who other people are, but we can never really know who another person is, right? And so we rely and we step back and rely on the what of who people are, right? And you do this, right? You meet people at a party and you describe what you do, right? Or you go to some gathering and you describe what party you belong to, right? Or, Michael wore her K-State shirt yesterday and people came up and talked to her because of what she was saying she was, right? I am a K-State fan. Oh, that was a great game. Good job beating Arizona, et cetera, right? They talked to her about what she is. And we leverage the what for the advantage that it gives us, right? So this is my name tag that I wear when I go and I do canon to the ordinary things on behalf of the bishop when I go out into the diocese. I just had 2 epic meetings down in the southern part of the diocese yesterday. All day long I was in meetings, and I wore this name tag the whole time. And why do I wear this name tag? Because it tells people, I would say before this week, that it tells people who I am, right? But if you look at this name tag, you can't see it because it's really small, but if you look at this name tag, I was going to count it, there are 14 words on here. 14 words on this little name tag. It's gold, so you know it's special. I wear it right here next to my collar. And I wear it when I'm out there doing the work. And only 2 of those 14 words could be anything close to who I am. My name, the unique identifier that I have, right? Patrick Funston, right there. But that means that there's 12 other words on here, right? The Episcopal Diocese of Kansas. I'm here because I'm part of the Episcopal Diocese of Kansas. I'm on staff at the Episcopal Diocese of Kansas. It says the Reverend Canon, which is at the same font size as my name, right? The Reverend Canon. I'm a priest. I'm something called a canon. And then not only that, but then below my name it says canon to the ordinary. It says canon twice. It explains I'm a canon. I'm a canon to the ordinary, which means I work for the bishop. And when I go into a space and I'm wearing this name tag, I'm the canon to the ordinary. People treat me differently because I'm telling them what I am. But I feel like, and I've been wrestling this whole week with this invitation of Jesus in the gospel, I think, to wonder about who we are rather than what we are. I've been thinking about it a lot and thinking about, the person who I love the most in this world is not in this room. I'm just kidding. She's right there. She's right there. She's right there. My wife. We've been married for 15 years now. And I remember when we were married on that August day many years ago, my father-in-law, who's also in this room, gave a toast. And one of the things that he said that has stuck with me these 15 years is he said, I pray and hope that you fall in love with each other more and more each day, right? Which is a lovely thing for a father-in-law to say. It's also like a true and challenging invitation to grow more in love with each other each day. But that challenge is really, it's a who challenge, right? Because while I may be a priest, which is a title, while I may be a canon of the ordinary, which is a job, and those things are static in what they are right now, my who-ness, who I am, is changing every day. And that's why it's so difficult to get to know one another. It's because we're constantly changing within ourselves. Our being is constantly shifting. And the thing about marriage is that your partner's self is always shifting as well. And so to grow more in love each day means to make the commitment to, no matter what how I change a little bit each day, no matter how much you change every day, I'm choosing love. I'm choosing to love. And then my kids, right? Like I've heard the parenting described. Parenting is, when you kind of start to get what parenting is, it's really you're learning about who your kids are and supporting them in their who-ness, rather than having them behave the way that you want, which is a what question or a how question in some ways. Who I am versus what I am. I feel like the Christian responsibility is to go out into the world and to be much more interested in the who-ness of people rather than the what-ness of people. And yet, our whole world is structured around the what. Everything that we put out there, because it's easier in some ways. It is so difficult to get to know the who of somebody. It takes time. It's relationship building. And in some ways, we get in our own way because we emblazon everything we do with our what, you know? We drive a car that tells us people about something. We put a sticker on the back of our car or something which tells people something about us. We put political signs in our yard which tells us what we are. We put labels on ourselves and on each other, you know? I'm a Republican, I'm a Democrat, I'm a K-State fan, I'm a KU fan. If I'm Oklahoma, I used to be in the Big 12 and now I'm in the SEC, and so therefore I'm better. You know, like we always are labeling ourselves and labeling one another. And those things get in the way over seeking the who-ness. Last week, Monica reminded us and challenged us to accept the reality that who we are is God's, made by love, in love, and for love in this world. And that's what the Christian work is to go out and loving this world. Which to me means that there's something more. There's something more that we need to understand if we're going to go out and transform and shift this world in the way that God challenges us. Our what defines us in some ways and connects us to each other or puts us and pairs us off against each other. Our invitation to know the who-ness of one another, it gets us there, but it's really difficult because it shifts, right? But as Christians, we're not called to worry about either of those things first. Instead, what we're called to realize and know is not what or who, but whose. Not what or who, we get those things, but our relationship with this world, with the people in this world, is primarily stemming from whose they are and whose we are. What do I mean by that? Part of what Jesus is saying in today's gospel, it's subtext a little bit, but he's saying, you are mine, right? The gospel is him telling all of these parables and stories, and basically the lesson of every single parable, spoiler alert here, is you are mine. You are God's. And therefore, we behave in the world in a slightly different way. We engage this world in a slightly different way because of whose we are. But it doesn't stop there. It turns out that all of this is God's. The who, for every person in this world. What and who, but whose, they are God's. And so we are therefore invited to engage people with that understanding. We are a sheep in God's fold, but so is every other person. I am a sheep in God's fold, but so are you. And so I am called to engage you, to learn about you, to learn your what's, to be curious about your who, to be in relationship with you because of who Christ is, because of what Christ modeled, because of what Christ showed. Not what, but who and whose. And that's enough. It should be enough. And yet it is very, very difficult because we let our what's get in the way. That's my challenge as I step away from this weekly role with you, is to hold that as you develop your relationship, I'm here with you, as we develop our relationship with Father Tom. He's the priest, he's your rector, he's going to lead the vestry meetings, but he's the leader of this spiritual community. He is God's, and so are you. So hold that as a truth and let it break through those barriers of what? I can't possibly know who you are because you're too distant from me. You're different from me. You support that guy or this person or whatever else, No. You are God's, made for love, by love. Thank you, Monica, for reminding us this last week. We transform this world through relationship. And that door is open to us because of who Christ was and who he made his own. which is all of us. Amen.